today to tell you guys a story, and I hope that by the end of it we can uncover some insights and raise some questions about what can occur when the government loses sight of the people it's meant to empower and to serve. My first time voting was in 2014. I was a sophomore here at Duke, so it seemed like a pretty straightforward thing. You register to vote, you go to the polling place, you vote, great, civic duty. So I registered to vote here on campus, showed up to my polling place a few weeks later. I showed up in the evening because at the time I was a full-time student and I was also working pretty much full-time. I had heard that there were going to be long lines. I waited in line for about an hour, maybe a little bit longer. When I got to the front of the line, I showed the poll worker my ID. She looked for my name and she couldn't find it. She said I wasn't registered to vote, which I thought was weird because I had definitely registered to vote. So that's exactly what I told her. And she responded, no problem, you can vote provisionally and you'll be good to go. I voted, turned in my ballot and got my little sticker. I walked out and ran into a professor, Gunther Peck, who was giving students rides home. I told him that I voted provisionally, and that was sort of the end of the conversation. I went home basking in the glory of getting to vote for the very first time. I was really excited about it. A few weeks went by, and then one day after class, Gunther came up to me, and he was sort of somber, and he was like, I have to tell you something. I was like, oh no, did I get a bad grade on a test? Like, what did I do? He said, when you told me that you voted provisionally, I felt this sinking feeling in my stomach. So I went to check your voting record, and you don't have a voting record. Your vote didn't count. I just remember being confused. I definitely voted. I definitely waited in line and did all the steps the correct way, or so I thought. It was really disorienting and sort of felt like stealing away this little coming-of-age moment for me. It was kind of sad. It didn't count because part of North Carolina's 2013 voter ID bill basically made provisional ballots illegal. It also made same-day registration illegal. And I don't think that the poll worker had any sense of being insincere or was trying to be deceptive. It's not her fault, and instead more of a statement about the larger institutional issues and legislation decisions that seek to disenfranchise people and to make it more difficult to do this very basic civic duty of voting. It's hard for me to process that as anything but insidious. I can't see any sort of democratic intent about that. My first time voting was indeed a coming-of-age experience, but very different than the one that I expected. But I do know that we have to keep the faith. We have a community here of people who care, and centering the narrative around compassion, around equitability, and around perseverance is really valuable. And we can still acknowledge and work through the trauma that occurs when your government doesn't want to protect you. They wouldn't be persecuting us if we weren't powerful, if we didn't have the ability to really make change. They're scared for a reason. Well, I think the youth vote is important for a few reasons. The first is because it's a constitutional right. Just because people are young doesn't mean that their values or opinions aren't important. They're greatly affected by the legislation that occurs throughout their lifetime, and decisions are being made now in legislation that will affect people who are children now for the entirety of their lives and affect the people that, their children and so on and so forth.
As young people and young minorities and young people of color, you have to get out there and network. I'm going to an event on Monday night.
People listen to their community, and they'll listen to you. You have a voice. Not everybody who's sort of creating the mainstream media knows about who you value, about people whose voice matters to you. And so some of it can be sort of grassroots stuff, and that's the power of social media. You can just sort of share the information and hope that people care. And so staying engaged and just sharing the information that you think is valuable is super important.
I was in college more than 50 years ago. And I started studying political science. I studied political science with the intent of going to law school. And after my sophomore year, I decided all of the civil rights cases would be decided and there'd be no work for me to do, because by the time I got out of law school, it'd all be over. Well, we are still today fighting the same battles over the same issues, the right to vote. So we have to work where we are. Like you said, it's slow. And by the way, it's not a steady progress up. We make some steps forward and we seem to slide back.
So a lesson I learned from my first time voting is that it matters. It's the responsibility of us all to protect that right. This is our country. It's supposed to be equitable. It's not supposed to be an oligarchy decided by a few people. So it's important to stay vigilant, it's important to pay attention, and it's important to keep trying. If we don't, then all that disenfranchisement really worked. Silencing the voices of young people, of black and brown people, worked. And then we don't get a say anymore. I think the country would be worse off. The people that I care about would be worse off if I don't stay engaged. So it's important to me to shape the way the future looks. It's not the government's future, it's mine too.